Before we get into the plumbing of the global banking system, we have to say it. This is not financial advice.
Absolutely.
We are just, two people looking at the mechanics of the financial world, trying to figure out how it all connects and offering up the facts as they exist today. And you have to understand, what we are looking at today is absolutely wild. Welcome to this deep dive into one of the most polarizing, resilient, and frankly, intensely legally tested digital assets in the history of the world.
Oh, without a doubt.
We're talking about XRP.
Oh.
And if you are sitting there listening to this, wondering why this matters to you, I want you to just picture the entire global financial system for a second.
Right.
Just visualize all the money moving around the planet every single second. Trillions of dollars. Now, imagine the machinery running that entire system is basically duct taped together.
It's a total disaster.
It's running on technology from the 1970s. And we've got a massive stack of sources today that pull back the curtain on this exact machinery.
Ugh.
We are looking at actual court filings from the Southern District of New York.
Beautiful documents. Incredible legal work.
Yeah, the physical, deeply, heavily litigated documents from Judge Annalisa Torres. We are going through the FIT 21 Act congressional memos regarding market structure. And we have these fascinating 2026 market reports from biddingcapital.com, plus a ton of dense legal analysis from Paul Weiss and Skadden Arps.
They're the best.
So our mission today, and we really want you right here in the room with us for this, is to uncover exactly how XRP survived what was literally a government cage match.
A bloodbath.
We're going to dig into why it was created, what it actually does in the real world, and how it somehow remains incredibly relevant in a world that is just completely dominated by Bitcoin and artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the narrative out there, this whole deep state versus crypto war, and it is just gritty, fascinating stuff.
Oh, it's the greatest story.
It really is. It's every man trying to understand why the powers that be wanted to crush this specific piece of technology so badly. You have to ask yourself, what was so threatening about this specific code?
Let me tell you, it is the greatest comeback story you will ever see. Maybe in the entire history of modern finance.
Yeah.
A tremendous, beautiful victory. What they did to this company and what the regulatory agencies tried to do was a total disaster, an absolute undeniable hit job. They threw the entire weight, the full crushing machinery of the federal government at Ripple.
Which is terrifying for any company.
Terrifying. Think about what happens when the government does that. Most companies, they fold instantly.
Right. They just settle.
They cry, they pay the billions of dollars in extortion disguised as fines, and they run away to hide. Not this company. They stood their ground, they looked at the regulators and said, we aren't moving an inch.
Yeah.
They went out and hired the best lawyers, the most brilliant, expensive, incredible legal minds you have ever seen in a courtroom, and they won. It was a massive, unprecedented victory over a regulatory regime that was completely out of control, making up rules as they went along. It's a beautiful thing to watch when someone...
I was reading through these legal briefs last night, and the sheer scale of the fight, the amount of money spent is just staggering.
Tens of millions.
Easily. But to really understand why this cage match even happened, we have to go all the way back to the genesis. Why was XRP created in the first place? Because I think for a lot of people listening to this, when you hear the word crypto, your brain immediately defaults to Bitcoin.
Sure. Digital gold.
Exactly. You think of Satoshi Nakamoto, you think of digital gold.
Yeah.
But XRP is fundamentally a completely different beast. We are talking about 2011, early 2012. You have these founders, Arthur Brito, Jed McCaleb, David Schwartz, and Chris Larsen.
Co-founder of Ripple. Great guy. Very smart.
Yeah, Chris Larsen. They were looking at Bitcoin, and they saw something that was brilliant. Sure, but it was limited. Bitcoin is a beautiful storage of value. You get it, you secure it cryptographically, you put it in a digital vault, and you just look at it.
You hold it.
Right, you hold it, you hope the number goes up. But it's slow. It's incredibly heavy. It takes 10 minutes, sometimes an hour, to actually confirm a transaction.
Which is useless for commerce.
Completely useless.
Yeah.
XRP wasn't built to be gold. It was built to be a bridge asset. It is purely a medium of exchange. It wasn't built to replace the US dollar, which is what the early cypherpunks wanted to do with Bitcoin.
They wanted to tear it all down.
Exactly. They wanted to destroy the fiat system. XRP was built to move the fiat system. It was built to move the dollar.
Exactly. And that distinction is everything. Bitcoin is wonderful. It's a phenomenal asset. It is gold. But you don't go down to the grocery store and pay for a carton of milk with a heavy bar of gold.
No, you'd look insane.
You'd look ridiculous. You don't use it to settle high-frequency international trade. It's too slow. It's too clunky. XRP is the ultimate bridge. And let's talk about why we even need a bridge. Because the old banking system, the one we are all forced to use right now, is a complete and total disaster.
The plumbing.
The plumbing is broken. Have you ever actually looked at the plumbing of how banks send money internationally?
Most people haven't. They just use an app and assume it's magic.
They use this ancient mechanism called the correspondent banking system. It is the laziest, most inefficient, worst system you could possibly imagine. It's literally a buddy system from the 1800s.
Wow.
I am not exaggerating. If a bank in New York wants to send money to a bank in Tokyo, they don't just zap the money over. That is a total myth.
Right. I think most people assume there's just a giant digital spreadsheet in the sky and they just change the numbers.
Not even close.
But that's not how it works at all.
They have to use what are called Nostro and Vostro accounts. Let me explain how ridiculous this is. Nostro means ours, and Vostro means yours in Latin.
Okay.
If that New York bank wants to do business in Tokyo, they have to pre-fund an account in Tokyo with Japanese yen. They have to keep billions of dollars, literally billions, sitting completely idle in accounts all over the world just in case somebody wants to make a transfer.
Just sitting there.
It is dead capital. It does absolutely nothing. It just sits there, trapped, losing value to inflation, purely to facilitate these slow, clunky wire transfers that still take 3 to 5 days to settle. It's an embarrassment.
Okay, let's unpack this Nostro and Vostro thing for a second, because when I first grasped this, my mind was blown. For you listening, imagine if every time you wanted to travel to a new city, say you might go to London or Paris or Tokyo,
Right.
imagine you had to fly there 6 months in advance, find a guy, and stash a physical wallet full of local cash with him.
It's insane.
Just in case you show up one day and want to buy a coffee. You'd have thousands of dollars tied up all over the world doing absolutely nothing. It's insane. And that brings us to Ripple's solution, which is on-demand liquidity, or ODL. This is where the complex terminology actually gets really cool, and you start to see why the legacy system was terrified.
Terrified.
If the old system is stashing wallets everywhere, ODL is just-in-time delivery for money.
It is a liquidity miracle.
It really is. You take your US dollars, and instead of routing them through 5 different intermediary banks taking a cut, you instantly convert them into XRP. You zip that XRP across the globe to Tokyo in literally 3 seconds on the open ledger.
3 seconds.
And then instantly converts on the other side into Japanese yen. Boom. Done. No idle money required. No Nostro or Vostro accounts trapping billions of dollars. It's completely frictionless.
A total miracle of technology. You don't need billions of lazy dollars sitting around doing nothing, getting eaten alive by inflation.
Yeah.
You use XRP as the neutral bridge, and the transaction is instant. 3 seconds. And you know with 100% certainty that the money is there. We call it deterministic settlement.
Deterministic settlement.
Right. The banks suddenly save massive amounts of capital. They can take those billions out of the dead Nostro accounts and actually deploy them into the economy, make loans, build businesses, and this is exactly where the crypto purists get it all completely wrong.
Well, let me push back on that for a second. Because
Ready?
you say crypto purists.
Yeah.
These are the people who built the space. And they look at Ripple and they despise it. They call it a banker coin. And frankly, they have a point, don't they?
No, they don't.
Well, the original ethos of crypto was to cut the banks out entirely. We lived through 2008. We saw what the traditional financial system did to the global economy.
A disaster.
So when these anarchists and purists see Ripple actively walking into boardrooms, shaking hands with the exact same institutions that caused the financial crisis, and offering them a tool to make their operations cheaper,
Yeah.
aren't we just handing the keys back to the wardens? Why should we be cheering for the banks to get a massive upgrade?
Because working with the banks is where the real winning happens. It's reality versus fantasy. The purists want to burn the whole system to the ground, but they don't have a plan for what comes the day after the fire.
That's fair.
Why would you fight the people who currently hold all the capital? The banks have the money, they have the infrastructure, they have the customers. You build a beautiful, flawless piece of technology, you partner with those institutions, and you make the system itself better. You upgrade the plumbing.
You fix it from the inside.
That is how you win on a global scale. You don't win by hiding in a basement trading obscure tokens. You win by fundamentally rewiring how the global economy transfers value.
It's the ultimate banker's rebel debate. The cypherpunks wanted a revolution, and Ripple decided to just stage a corporate takeover of the plumbing. But, fixing the plumbing of the global elite doesn't just happen quietly.
Never.
When you threaten to make an ancient, highly profitable system obsolete, you put a massive target on your back. And I want to look at December 2020 because the timing of what happened next is highly, highly suspicious. This brings us right into the epic SEC war.
The hit job.
The cage match. We have to look at the timeline here because it is wild. It's late December 2020. We are quite literally days before Christmas.
Disgusting time.
The administration is about to turn over. And out of nowhere, the SEC, later spearheaded by Gary Gensler, the SEC chair, decides to drop a nuclear bomb on Ripple. They file a massive lawsuit against the company. They personally sue Brad Garlinghouse.
CEO of Ripple. Great guy.
Right, the CEO. And they personally sue Chris Larsen. They claim that Ripple conducted a $1.3 billion unregistered securities offering.
Insanity.
And they didn't just claim they did it recently. They claimed that every single sale of XRP going all the way back to 2013 was an illegal securities offering.
It was a hit job
Yeah,
right before Christmas. Who does that? Let me tell you who does that. People who are trying to protect a monopoly.
Yeah.
It was a vicious, coordinated attack to protect the old, slow dinosaur banks that make billions and billions of dollars every single year just on wire fees. Think about the pure economics of it.
Okay.
If you have a brilliant technology that moves money globally for fractions of a penny in 3 seconds, the people currently making $40 every time you send a wire transfer are going to be very, very upset.
Right, their margins are destroyed.
Their entire business model goes to zero. So what do? They don't compete. They can't compete. Their technology is garbage. So they send in the regulators. They weaponize the government. Gary Gensler and his entire regulatory apparatus have been an absolute disaster for American innovation.
They really tried to freeze the whole thing.
They tried to freeze the entire Ripple project globally. And to do it, they used this ancient, ridiculous, completely outdated rule called the Howey test to try and crush them.
I really want to dive deep into this Howey test for you listening, because if you don't understand Howey, you cannot understand the crypto regulatory war. This is the crux of the entire thing.
It really is.
The SEC wasn't using a law written for the digital age. They were using a legal precedent from a 1946 Supreme Court case, SEC versus W.J. Howey Co.
1946.
Let's really take the picture of what this case was. We were talking about the 1940s. The W.J. Howey Company owned massive tracts of citrus groves in Florida. Literally oranges. They would go to tourists staying at local hotels, people who had no idea how to farm, and they would sell them little tracts of the orange grove. But the catch was, the tourists didn't actually farm the oranges. They signed a service contract with Howey in the Hills Service, Inc., another company owned by the exact same guy, to cultivate, harvest, and sell the oranges.
Right.
The tourists just sat back and expected a share of the profits based entirely on the hard work of the Howey Company.
Which makes sense for an orange grove.
Exactly. So the Supreme Court looked at this and said, okay, this is an investment contract. This is a security. And they created the Howey test, which has 4 prongs. It has to be an investment of money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profit derived solely from the efforts of others.
Right.
The core difference here is between buying a share in an orange grove company, expecting the farmers to make you rich, which is a security, versus going to the farmer's market and just buying a basket of oranges. If you buy a basket of oranges, that's a commodity. You buy it, you eat it, you squeeze it for juice, you throw it at a wall, it's yours. It has utility. The SEC rolled into federal court in 2020 and tried to look a judge in the eye and say that every single time someone anywhere in the world bought the digital code called XRP, they were effectively investing in Ripple the company, exactly like buying a share of that 1946 orange grove.
And it was the most terrible, embarrassing legal argument you will ever see. You are talking about applying a rule from 1946 about physical oranges and dirt to decentralized, open-source digital computer code that moves across the globe at the speed of light.
It's wild.
It makes absolutely no sense. It's an insult to the intelligence of the American public. But Ripple, and this is why I have so much respect for their executive team, they didn't back down. They fought back with the most brilliant, aggressive legal strategy imaginable. They used the fair notice defense.
The fair notice defense.
They marched into federal court, looked at the SEC, and said, "Excuse me, you cannot legally punish us for breaking a rule that you never clearly explained."
Which is pretty basic due process.
It's a fundamental tenet of due process in this country. The SEC absolutely refused to give the market clear guidelines. They refused to write new rules for crypto. They just wanted to regulate by enforcement. They wanted to sit in the bushes, wait for companies to build incredible things, and then jump out, sue them, and ask questions later. But Ripple said, no. You didn't give us fair notice. Your own rules are a contradictory disaster.
And the beauty of the fair notice defense is that it wasn't just them saying we didn't know. It was them proving that nobody knew, not even the SEC, which we will get into with the Hemming emails in a minute.
Oh, that's a great story.
But this entire legal bloodbath eventually leads to the Torres Doctrine. This is the big win. We are talking about Judge Annalisa Torres in the Southern District of New York. In July 2023, she drops a ruling that completely shakes the foundations of the global crypto market.
A beautiful ruling.
She essentially splits the baby, but she does it in a way that gives Ripple the ultimate high ground. She writes this incredibly dense, thoughtful opinion where she breaks down the sales of XRP into categories. She ruled that programmatic sales, which means blind transactions on public exchanges through trading algorithms.
The retail stuff.
Right, basically where you or I might go on a Coinbase, click buy XRP, and we have absolutely no idea who is on the other side of that trade. We don't know if we are buying from Ripple or Bob in Texas or a miner in Iceland. She ruled that those blind programmatic sales are not securities because there is no contract. There is no promise from Ripple to you.
Exactly.
But she also ruled that institutional sales, meaning direct, written, negotiated contracts between Ripple, a company, and massive institutional buyers like hedge funds, are securities. Because in those specific boardrooms, those hedge funds were relying on Ripple's efforts.
It was a massive, unprecedented victory. Do you understand the magnitude of what Judge Torres did here? She saw right through the SEC's complete nonsense. She decoupled the asset from the contract.
She separated the orange from the grove.
Beautifully said. She said the token itself, the actual digital XRP, is just computer code. It is not inherently a security. It's just a thing, like an orange. The way it is sold determines the law. If a giant, sophisticated hedge fund signs a literal written contract with Ripple, where Ripple promises to build out the ecosystem, okay, maybe that specific transaction is an investment contract.
That makes sense.
But if an ordinary person buys it on a public, decentralized exchange, no, absolutely not a security. The SEC was furious. They were humiliated. They tried to appeal it immediately. They filed for an interlocutory appeal, basically begging the higher courts to step in and save them from this massive defeat.
Because they knew their whole house of cards was falling.
And they failed. Completely, utterly rejected.
They really were shut down. Judge Torres denied the interlocutory appeal, essentially telling the SEC that they didn't have grounds to interrupt the legal process just because they were losing. And this entire saga dragged on for years, burning tens of millions of dollars in legal fees. Finally, we get to the conclusion in May 2025, the final settlement.
Total victory.
Let's look at the numbers, because they tell the real story of who won this cage match. Originally, the SEC came out swinging, demanding a staggering $2 billion penalty. They wanted to absolutely gut the company.
Extortion.
Then, after the Torres ruling decimated their case, they quietly lowered their demand to $125 million, and the final settlement signed by the judge. Ripple pays a $50 million fine, specifically only for those past institutional sales.
Pocket change.
Even more critically, the SEC's request for disgorgement, which is a legal mechanism where they try to force a company to pay back all of their profits, was completely denied by the court. The judge looked at the evidence and said there was absolutely no proof that any institutional investors were actually harmed or lost money.
Because they made a fortune.
Exactly. Many of them made a fortune. Both sides mutually dropped all their remaining appeals. The cage match ended.
$50 million. That is a rounding error for a massive company like Ripple. It's pocket change. They paid the $50 million, they shook hands with the defeated regulators, and they walked away with a total, undeniable victory for technological innovation. The SEC had to pack up their briefcases and go home in disgrace.
It's an incredible story.
And because they fought this all the way to the end, something beautiful happened. Because of this 2025 settlement, XRP became the only major digital asset in the United States of America with absolute, definitive, court-mandated legal clarity. It is a beautiful, massive legal moat that absolutely no other cryptocurrency has. Bitcoin has a sort of regulatory handshake agreement that it's a commodity, but XRP has a federal judge's signature. It's untouchable.
It's an incredible legal precedent. And to really understand the culture that grew around this asset while all this was happening, we need to dive into some story time. Because the crypto space isn't just about code and courts. It's about the narratives, the strategies, and the people behind it. There are these fascinating tales from the XRP ecosystem that you can literally take to your next social event, bring them up over a drink, and just completely blow people's minds.
Oh, the stories are fantastic.
These stories really highlight the sheer grit and the long-term corporate strategy behind Ripple. Let's start with story one, the 55 billion XRP escrow.
Brilliant move.
So, early on in the project's life, Ripple, the company, held a massive portion of the total XRP supply. The maximum supply is 100 billion tokens, and Ripple held over half of it. The open market was absolutely terrified. Investors were looking at this and thinking, okay, the tech is great, but if Ripple wakes up one morning and decides to just dump all this XRP on the open market, the price will instantly crash to zero.
Total panic.
Right, it's too centralized.
Yeah.
So what did Ripple do to solve a problem of human trust?
They did something beautiful, highly, highly responsible. They didn't just put out a press release saying, trust us. They used the technology itself. They took 55 billion XRP and they locked it up in a cryptographic escrow. It's a digital lockbox written directly into the foundational code of the ledger itself.
Lead into the math.
Exactly. Nobody can touch it. Not Brad Garlinghouse, not the board of directors, nobody. The way it works mathematically is brilliant. Every single month, on the first of the month, the code automatically releases a set maximum amount of XRP, usually 1 billion tokens.
Right.
Ripple can use that to fund their operations, invest in new projects, or sell to institutions. But here's the genius part. If Ripple doesn't use the full billion that month, which they almost never do, the unused portion goes right back into a new lockbox at the end of the line, locked away for years. It was an absolute masterclass in fiduciary responsibility.
It really was a flex.
A massive flex. They looked at the market and said, we are acting in the best long-term interests of this entire ecosystem. We physically cannot dump on you. Brad Garlinghouse, a very sharp, impressive guy, looks like he's straight out of central casting for a Fortune 500 CEO. He stood up and said they were going to be completely transparent. And the big banks, the institutions, they loved it. They finally saw a crypto company acting like mature adults, providing predictable, transparent supply metrics.
Meanwhile, the hardcore crypto purists hated the escrow. They argued it was just proof of centralized control, that a true decentralized asset shouldn't have a corporate entity managing an escrow in the first place. But again, it's that banker's rebel dynamic. They optimized for institutional trust over cypherpunk ideology.
And they won.
But let's pivot to story two, because this one is even wilder. This is the drama of the legal discovery phase during the SEC lawsuit. The Hinman emails. This literally sounds like a political thriller, and it exposes so much about how the government operates behind closed doors.
A total scandal.
We have to rewind back to 2018. William Hinman, who was a very powerful director of the Division of Corporation Finance at the SEC, gave a highly publicized speech. In this speech, he essentially gave Ethereum a total free pass.
Unbelievable.
He declared that Ether was not a security because, in his words, it was sufficiently decentralized. It was a massive moment for crypto. Fast forward to the lawsuit against Ripple. Ripple's lawyers, in a stroke of absolute genius, demanded that the SEC hand over all the internal emails and drafts surrounding that 2018 Hinman speech. They wanted to know exactly how the SEC came to that conclusion.
Oh, and let me tell you, the SEC fought tooth and nail to keep those emails hidden from the public. They tried every dirty trick in the legal playbook. They claimed attorney-client privilege. They claimed deliberative process privilege. They appealed the order multiple times.
Because they knew what was in them?
Of course they knew. But the Judge Sarah Netburn, who handled the discovery phase, a very sharp, no-nonsense judge, she looked at the SEC and forced them to hand the documents over. And when those emails finally came out to the public, what did they show? Intense, absolute internal disagreement, total hypocrisy at the highest levels of government. It proved that even the SEC's own top lawyers and department heads didn't know what the rules were. They were arguing with each other in the drafts, warning Hinman that his speech was going to confuse the market and contradict existing law. Yet at the exact same time, they were punishing Ripple for supposedly breaking these rules that they couldn't even agree on internally. It exposed the entire regulatory apparatus as arbitrary, conflicted, and completely making it up as they went along. It was a devastating, humiliating blow to the SEC's credibility.
Exactly. This is why we spent so much time on the fair notice defense. The Hinman emails proved that it wasn't just a clever legal theory, It was the gritty reality.
Yeah.
How could Ripple possibly have fair notice of what constituted a security if the directors of the SEC were literally emailing each other saying, hey, we probably shouldn't say this, it's legally confusing?
The smoking gun.
Here's the smoking gun. Okay, let's move to story 3. Let's travel across the world, far away from the mess of the U.S. regulatory system, to Japan. The Japan SBI connection. You have this towering figure in Asian finance, Yoshitaka Kitao, the CEO of SBI Holdings. He's effectively the undisputed godfather of XRP in Asia. He saw exactly what Ripple was building years ago, recognized the utility, and went completely all in.
Kitai-san is an absolute genius, a visionary, a total winner in every sense of the word. To really grasp what he's doing, you have to look at the ordinary Japanese view of society and technology.
Right.
In Japan, they have this deeply ingrained cultural and philosophical concept called wa. It translates roughly to harmony, order, peace. When the traditional Japanese financial sector looks at Bitcoin, they don't see a revolution, they see digital anarchy.
They see chaos.
Exactly. They see chaos. It's incredibly slow. It consumes massive amounts of electricity just to run its mining rigs, and its entire ethos is built on fighting the government. But when they look at XRP, XRP brings order. It is clean, it is green, it is efficient, and most importantly, it explicitly works with the regulators. It creates harmony within the existing financial system rather than trying to tear it down.
And you have to factor in the macroeconomic reality of Japan. They have this incredibly high-tech society, but it is a rapidly aging economy. Their population demographics are shifting heavily. They need absolute efficiency in their financial systems to maintain their economic standing.
They need speed.
Kitao championed XRP because of a technical feature we briefly mentioned earlier, deterministic settlement. If you are a major financial institution trying to settle billions of dollars in trade, Bitcoin is a nightmare. You send a transaction and you have to wait for block confirmations. Maybe it takes 10 minutes. Maybe the network is congested and it takes an hour. You are literally hoping your transaction goes through while the price is fluctuating. It's a gamble.
And banks don't gamble with settlements.
No. With the XRP ledger, you have deterministic settlement. You know with 100% mathematical certainty that the deal is either perfectly done or it fails completely in exactly 3 seconds. There is no limbo. Kitao recognized this and has been aggressively pushing for XRP to serve as the bridge asset to run right alongside a future digital yen.
It is magnificent foresight. They want a high-speed fast lane for institutional money, and the XRP ledger is the fastest, most reliable lane ever built. While the U.S. regulators were playing foolish political games and driving innovation offshore, Japan was quietly, methodically building the infrastructure for the future of finance.
Which brings us to story 4, and this one is vital because it is a major crypto mythbuster. You constantly hear this narrative, especially parroted by politicians who don't understand the tech. That crypto is exclusively for criminals, hackers, and illicit finance.
The biggest lie.
They say it's just drug dealers and ransomware. So let's look at the facts. Let's look at the massive 2021 Colonial Pipeline hack. For those who don't remember, a group of hackers managed to infiltrate and take control of a massive U.S. energy pipeline that supplied fuel to the East Coast.
Terrible situation.
It caused gas shortages, panic, the whole 9 yards. The hackers demanded a $2.3 million ransom, and they demanded it in Bitcoin. The company, desperate to get the fuel flowing, actually paid the ransom. But here is the massive, glaring detail that the anti-crypto politicians always conveniently miss about blockchain technology.
They miss the fundamental reality that blockchain is a traceability miracle. Everyone in Washington thinks crypto is this dark, anonymous shadow money. It's not. It is a permanent, immutable, completely public ledger. Every single transaction, every fraction of a penny is recorded forever for everyone on the planet to see.
Right.
When the Colonial Pipeline hackers took that Bitcoin, they couldn't hide it. The FBI, utilizing basic blockchain analysis tools, just looked at the public ledger. They followed the money step by step, wallet by wallet, exactly to the hackers' accounts, and they recovered the millions of dollars. Do you know how hard it is to do that with traditional fiat currency?
Nearly impossible.
You can't do that with suitcases of physical $100 bills. You can't trace a pallet of cash. Traditional, untraceable U.S. dollar cash is still, by far, the preferred tool for actual criminals. Blockchain actually empowers and helps law enforcement. The politicians claiming crypto is only for criminals are pushing a completely false, manipulative narrative.
And navigating those false narratives perfectly transitions us into Section 4. politics, economics, and the global divide. Because right now you have the FIT-21 Act, the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act, making its way through the legislative meat grinder in Congress.
A very important piece of legislation.
Now, when you look at Washington right now, the battle lines over FIT-21 are wild. And it really highlights the massive ideological divide in how we view technology. And I want to be clear for everyone listening, we are impartially reporting on this. We aren't taking sides here, but you need to understand the battlefield.
Right.
On the left, the entire argument essentially hinges on consumer protection. The left-wing view looks at the volatility of the crypto markets, the spectacular collapse of exchanges like FTX, and the prevalence of pump and dump scams, and they argue that this entire industry is a danger to the retail investor. They believe crypto can easily be weaponized for illicit finance, that it intentionally evades traditional banking safeguards, and therefore it requires very strict, heavy-handed, paternalistic regulation by agencies like the SEC to protect ordinary working-class investors from getting wiped out.
And then you flip the script entirely and you look at the right-wing view. The right views this entirely as a disastrous innovation drain. They argue that the SEC, particularly under Gensler, has become a completely rogue, out-of-control agency. They believe that by refusing to write clear rules and instead just suing everyone, the SEC is actively stifling American innovation. They are taking brilliant multi-billion-dollar companies that were born in the USA and forcing them to flee overseas to jurisdictions like Europe, Dubai, and Asia, where the governments actually welcome them.
The brain drain.
The brain drain is real. The right's argument is that regulation by enforcement is un-American. They want the FIT-21 Act to pass because it would rip massive amounts of power away from the SEC and hand it over to the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. The CFTC is generally viewed as much more reasonable. The goal is to legally classify the vast majority of these digital assets as digital commodities, not securities, allowing the free market to actually build and thrive without the constant threat of a federal lawsuit.
Right. It's a classic battle between the desire for absolute safety and the desire for unbridled innovation. But I want to step back from the messy politics for a second and look at a complex macroeconomic theory. Because when you understand this theory, you suddenly understand why a digital asset like XRP isn't just a cool tech product. It might actually be a vital necessity on a global geopolitical scale.
It is a necessity.
Have you ever heard of the Triffin dilemma? This is a core macroeconomic concept named after the economist Robert Triffin, who identified it in the 1960s. The theory goes like this. The global economy desperately needs a single global reserve currency to function. Countries need a trusted medium to conduct international trade.
Since Bretton Woods.
Exactly. For the last 80 years, basically since the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, that currency has been the U.S. dollar. But here is the trap, the dilemma. The country providing that global reserve currency, the United States, is forced into a paradox. To keep the global economy functioning, the U.S. must constantly pump massive amounts of dollars out into the world. If there aren't enough dollars out there, global trade grinds to a halt. But to pump those dollars out, the U.S. has to run massive perpetual trade deficits. We have to constantly buy more from the world than we sell to them just to export our currency. Over decades, this forces the United States to drown in astronomical debt. You have to print endless money to satisfy global demand, which eventually, inevitably devalues the currency and destroys the domestic manufacturing base. It's a fatal flaw in the system.
It is a massive, crushing economic problem. The Triffin dilemma is an absolute trap for any empire. But here is the aha moment. Here is where the brilliance of XRP becomes a truly profound, world-changing innovation.
Let's hear it.
XRP can act as the global neutral asset. Think about it. It is not controlled by the United States Federal Reserve. It is not controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. It is not controlled by the European Central Bank. It is a pure, mathematical, politically neutral bridge.
Right.
If sovereign nations could use XRP to settle their massive global trade imbalances instantly, they wouldn't have to hoard trillions of US dollars in their central bank reserves. It completely bypasses the Triffin dilemma. It allows value to flow freely and instantly across the globe without forcing one single nation to bear the crushing, unsustainable debt of supplying the world's reserve currency. It fixes a broken macroeconomic model from the 1960s with open source code.
It's wild to think about it that way. A piece of software potentially solving the debt paradox of the American empire.
It's beautiful.
But let's take this analysis even further into the future. I want to pivot to Section 5, the AI view, because right now we are still talking about human banks, human hedge funds, and human politicians. But we are rapidly moving toward a world where autonomous AI agents start running massive segments of the economy.
It's happening right now.
If an AI is tasked with executing millions of complex microtransactions every single minute, buying server space, purchasing data sets, paying for energy, what currency is that AI actually going to use?
Right. I will tell you right now, and this is an absolute certainty, an AI does not care about your internet memes. It does not care about cypherpunk ideology or politics or who the SEC chairman is. An AI is a pure calculating utility maximizer. It only looks for one thing, the mathematically cheapest, fastest, most reliable path to get from point A to point B, period.
Right. So let's run the simulation. Let's compare the options an AI actually has on the table. It looks at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is incredibly secure, the network is robust, but it's incredibly slow. An AI operates and thinks in milliseconds. Telling an autonomous agent it has to wait 10 minutes or an hour for a Bitcoin block to settle a microtransaction is like telling you to wait a decade for an email to
Just
send.
an eternity.
It's an eternity.
Mm.
So the AI looks at Ethereum. Ethereum is programmable, it has smart contracts, which AI loves, but the gas fees, the cost to transact on the network, are totally unpredictable and heavily expensive. If an AI wants to send a $1 data packet, paying a $10 network fee makes absolutely zero economic sense.
Right.
Then you have Solana. The market loves Solana right now. It is incredibly fast, it has high throughput. But historically, if you look at the data, the Solana network has suffered from severe congestion and total network crashes.
Solana is fast, yes, but it crashes. It's historically low energy in terms of reliability, and AI cannot and will not tolerate downtime. If an AI is running a critical supply chain, it needs absolute bulletproof reliability, and that is exactly why an AI will ultimately choose to utilize the XRP ledger. The XRP ledger has a feature called pathfinding built directly into its foundational code.
Yeah, pathfinding is a fascinating mechanic.
Yeah.
If you aren't familiar with it, the XRP ledger automatically, mathematically scans the entire decentralized network and finds the absolute cheapest, most efficient way to swap any two assets across the globe. Imagine you have an AI agent in London that needs to instantly buy localized weather data from an AI agent in Delhi. The London AI holds British pounds, the Delhi AI demands Indian rupees. The AI doesn't want to log on to an exchange, place a buy order, wait for a match, and engage in a speculative trade. It just wants to settle the transaction instantly.
Exactly. It bypasses the trade entirely. It executes the mathematical reality of the transfer. Boom, done. No human emotion, no waiting. The pathfinding algorithm finds the liquidity, converts the pound to XRP, zips it to India, and converts it to rupees in 3 seconds. And here is the kicker. The XRP ledger has over 10 years of uninterrupted, flawless uptime.
Which is incredible for any network.
Over a decade without a single network crash. It is a hardened, battle-tested, enterprise-grade protocol. For a machine-to-machine economy where billions of these microtransactions are happening every single second without any human intervention, XRP is the perfect, frictionless fuel. It is inevitable.
Which brings us to the outro. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from 1940s orange groves to AI data swaps. Let's do a quick executive summary of the key lessons we've extracted from all these court documents, market reports, and congressional memos.
Let's do it.
The single biggest lesson here: legal clarity is a massive moat. Because Ripple had the war chest and the grit to fight that SEC cage match to the bitter end, and because they secured that 2025 final settlement, XRP is now the only major crypto asset with definitive, court-ordered legal clarity in the United States. Judge Annalisa Torres made sure of that. While other projects are constantly looking over their shoulders, terrified of a subpoena, Ripple is operating with a judicially mandated green light.
It's a massive advantage.
The second major lesson is that interoperability is the ultimate endgame. Ripple isn't trying to be the edgy rebel that kills the fiat system. They are building the internet of value. They are building the underlying protocol to connect all the disparate, siloed financial networks seamlessly.
It's all about connecting the value, dominating the flow of capital. And let's look at the concrete forecast because the future trajectory here is incredibly bullish for this specific technology.
In the short term, looking over the next year, we are firmly entering the IPO phase.
The IPO phase. Ripple as a company is perfectly, beautifully positioned to go public. They have the absolute legal clarity. They have a massive corporate war chest. And we are already seeing the traditional financial world surrendering to the reality of the tech. We are seeing institutional XRP ETFs launching on the NASDAQ, tickers like XRPI and XRPT. We are seeing CME futures for XRP. Wall Street is fully, openly unlatching the gates.
And if we stretch that timeline out, long term, over the next 5 to 10 years, We are looking at what analysts are calling the CBDC backbone. Central bank digital currencies. Global governments are inevitably going to build their digital dollars, their digital euros, their digital yen. But they are not going to build their sovereign economies on public, chaotic, highly congested networks like Ethereum or Solana.
No, that would be a disaster.
They're going to build them on private, highly secure, permissioned versions of the XRP ledger. And they will use the public XRP token as the universal gas to seamlessly connect all these sovereign national networks
It's
together.
already happening.
Ripple has even received a conditional national trust bank charter from the OCC back in January 2026. They are actively issuing their own fully backed, regulatory compliant stablecoin, the RLUSD. They are literally, brick by brick, transforming into the foundational trust layer of the new global financial system.
They are the foundation. They survived the ultimate government hit job. They beat the regulators at their own game in federal court, and now they're actively building the architecture for the future of global finance. It is a total, undeniable win.
It really is an unbelievable trajectory. And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to chew on as we wrap up this deep dive. We've talked a lot today about efficiency, about bridging assets, about AI utility maximizers, seamlessly settling billions of transactions.
Yeah.
But I want you to think about the dark side of perfect efficiency. If XRP, or a technology exactly like it, becomes the frictionless, perfectly traceable, public ledger fuel for global central banks and autonomous AI, what happens to personal privacy?
It's a big question.
If every single transaction you make, every coffee, every medical bill, every political donation is instantly settled and permanently recorded on a perfectly efficient, unalterable global ledger run by utility-maximizing machines, have we inadvertently built the ultimate surveillance state? In our quest to fix the clunky, annoying plumbing of the 1800s banking system, have we traded our financial privacy for perfect, frictionless efficiency? It's a terrifyingly thin line between a utopian internet of value and a dystopian financial panopticon. Something for you to chew on.
That is the ultimate question. The technology is neutral, but how humanity chooses to wield that perfect efficiency will define the next century.
It really will. Thank you for joining us for this extensive analysis. If you like this talk, please subscribe and like this channel.